Justin, I know that you had come across a conversation this week that was interesting to get the backstory on the Luke McCaffrey decision and all that went down there, because I certainly have some thoughts about it myself, but I'll let you take it away in regards to talking about what Adam Carricker delivered this week.
Yeah, so there was just a clip that, kind of was bumping around Twitter of Luke McCaffrey, and it, there was this belief that he didn't necessarily want to move positions, but then he went to Rice and played wide receiver. So people were kind of like, well, move positions there or whatever. But he said that he was never asked to move positions by Frost. And it's just one of these things where it's like, words, who do you believe? Because back then there was this, Christian McCaffrey was, kind of, I guess, a little upset about the fact that they were asking him to move positions, which would lead me to believe that actually happened. So hearing Luke McCaffrey saying that didn't happen, if it didn't, that just shows, because I've talked about how Frost was before. Frost really, really was set on his guys. Frost did not like to mix it up, did not like to, bench guys or replace guys. Tommy Hill really, had some struggles under Frost and really just lacked a lot of the effort and the hustle that he has now. And, Frost really didn't want to change things up. And even at the detriment of the defense, it's like he picked his favorites. And I think with Luke McCaffrey, he didn't use him in the way that he needed to be used. And that was another thing where it's like Frost is so set on, like, you play quarterback, we're putting you at quarterback. And that's the biggest difference between these two things too, is now guys are moving all over the place. Luke McCaffrey, if we would have moved him around the field, he would have been a stud. At the times he was moved around the field, lined up in the backfield, put out receiver, he did really well. So it's really hard. I just don't know. I don't know who to believe, just because I can't take anyone at face value. But it was just weird because Christian McCaffrey did seem to have an issue about that. But yeah, he didn't have the arm to be a starting quarterback. Yeah, he really didn't. He was always a slider frame. And he was twitchy. He was one of those. He reminded me kind of Logan Smothers. Logan Smothers was very similar, where you had to really kind of have certain packages to run Logan Smothers at running back. He really didn't have the frame. He didn't have the arm strength to be a starting quarterback, especially in the Big Ten. And because, Rule talked about this before, especially at home games, the wind starts kicking down there, and you need a big bodied guy with a strong arm to be able to push that ball through the wind. And McCaffrey was never going to be able to do that. So the fact, if that's true that he never asked him to switch, that's just complete negligence on his part of being able to evaluate talent and put them where they need to go. And again, that's one of the things that I love about the staff, and what the staff is doing differently, and what's going to make this team better, is the fact that they check these guys out everywhere. And we're having position changes all over the place, and it's something we haven't seen before. And getting true freshman reps, because that was another thing. The true freshmen weren't really, or the redshirt freshmen and these younger guys weren't really getting reps. He's stuck with the upperclassmen, and those guys didn't get the development they needed, because we've talked about this before. Nebraska getting off the bus was probably the fourth most talented team in the Big Ten when Frost was the coach there, as far as just like recruiting rankings, the size of the guys. Like, they looked bigger than some of these teams, but they just didn't play to their size. They didn't play to their ability. And I think that was partially due to the lack of development, because, he didn't get these guys on the field. He didn't get them rotating reps. It was just a train wreck as it was. And that's why you had guys like McCaffrey leaving, and that's why you have guys now staying, because they are giving these people looks everywhere and kind of developing them everywhere, which is going to help them in the future get to the NFL, et cetera.
To me, your Luke McCaffrey story, courtesy Adam Carricker, of course, was a contrast in the Scott Frost regime and the Matt Rule regime. I just can't believe that there's going to be a situation that's going to go down under Matt Rule like that. If a player decides to move on, it's because playing time, NIL, I just want to see what this situation's about and I want to go there. Not, we really didn't communicate and we didn't have an understanding. Just Matt Rule is so proficient at, this is what we're doing. Okay, we want to know what are your goals and objectives, and we want to be on the same page so we're understanding of what you want, who you think you are, what position, and if there's any kind of changes that we see, we're going to make sure we're communicating that to you and you understand the expectation or the thoughts or ideas or suggestions we have about changing what you are on this team. Just that whole communication breakdown just seems to be classic Scott Frost.
Yep. Yeah. And the more stories that we heard about after in terms of recruiting and how he was handling certain things, communication was not a strong suit. And communication with, he really didn't connect with the media and the fans. That's why, I mean, sometimes, occasionally, but towards the end, it was kind of like, this is on us. He was always, this is on the staff. This is on the staff. This is on us. This is on us. And there was none of that player accountability. And so like you said, it's just a stark contrast and a stark difference to how they're handling this team. And to Fongwei's question here, what was the bigger blunder, bringing in McCaffrey to play QB or bringing a turnover machine, expecting him not to turn over? Considering McCaffrey was, kind of probably a third string, I don't think that impacted too much. When you bring in a bad first stringer and as bad as Sims, I would say that's probably worse. However, on the grand scheme of things, comparing Matt Rule to Scott Frost, Matt Rule that was the most important decision that he had to make, and he got it wrong. But there was a lot more that he got right. So I don't necessarily hold that against him. He was trying to get somebody in there who's going to be able to push Casey Thompson, and then all of a sudden Casey Thompson left. There was unexpected things that happened. That was supposed to be kind of an iron sharpens iron. Casey was supposed to stay and battle it out and had the confidence that he could win the job, and he probably could have if he stayed, all things considered now. But yeah, he just kind of got that wrong, but there were some circumstances that went into that. No quarterback coach, et cetera. But Jeff Sims was not going to be the guy regardless. Jeff Sims, he is what he is at that point. He's an athlete with bad accuracy and a bad arm. And, well, he had somewhat of an arm, but he was just he wasn't refined as a passer. He didn't know how to go through his progressions. When route concepts would open up, he wouldn't really see the opening. There was times where we would have deep crossers down the field, and those deep crossers, they're to kind of get the safety. Let's say they're in cover 1, right? Or even cover 2. Like, it's supposed to get the safeties crossed up and the corners crossed up. And there were a few instances where those would work. You would see those work, and he would just immediately out of the break be throwing it to the guy that's double covered. And that is just a decision-making issue because he wasn't instinctive as a passer. He was one read and try to get out. And, with the inability to catch the snaps and all that stuff, it was never going to work. He was never a good passer. They wanted him up to 65% completion percentage, but he was 55% at Georgia Tech. It was just a mountain to climb, and a lot of things went wrong in the process. But yeah, at least he was able to get Raiola, and he more than made up for it by getting Dylan Raiola for sure.
Speaking of which, folks, we released our Big Ten quarterback rankings over on the national channel, so please check those out. And of course, Dylan Raiola has yet to take a snap in college. So where do you rank him? Well, my approach was taking a similar approach to the way I rank coaches, is that if there's a new coach coming in, he's done nothing good, he's done nothing positive, he's done nothing wrong. He's neutral.
Yep.
So, of course, those guys are generally going to go to the bottom. However, if there are coaches that I don't believe are getting the job done, not meeting expectations, I'll actually rank them below the new coaches because their tenure to that point is negative as opposed to neutral.
Yep.
Okay, when it comes to Dylan Raiola, I ranked him ninth in the Big Ten out of 18 quarterbacks, which is a pretty decent rating considering there are experienced quarterbacks behind him
Yep.
that aren't bad. Ethan Kalkumanis, who leaves Minnesota to go to Rutgers. There's one example right there. Ethan Garbers, who's at UCLA and won a bowl game last year. But, there's a lot of projection out of that ranking, of course. I'll go back to my national quarterback rankings the year that Bryce Young eventually won the Heisman Trophy. And I had all sorts of people all over me because I ranked Bryce Young as the second best quarterback in the country to start the season. They said, how can you rank this kid the number 2 quarterback in the country? He's only thrown 6 passes. I said, well, yeah, I'm trusting here. This is a projection. So most of the rankings are based obviously on performance to date and production. I do my best. This is how I rate, at least, Justin, is to take the other. This is impossible to do, but I still make an attempt to take the other players out of the equation. So if Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL and he suddenly gets thrown behind the worst offensive line with the worst weapons, his numbers are going to suffer, but I'm still going to try to just watch him and evaluate him. So a lot of people make quarterback rankings and they base it on and talk a lot about the complementary pieces in the offensive line to say this projects to this great stat line, and that's what it's going to be. I try to take that out of it best I can and just say these are the quarterbacks 1 through 18 in my viewpoint at this point, regardless of the weapons that surround them. And I've got Dylan Raiola at 9.
Yeah. And I think that's completely fair because even having him at 9, like you said, that's probably higher than some other people have him just because he hasn't played a snap. We're just starting to hear some things about, that he's doing well, but not a whole lot of information, not a whole lot of, film out on him. We have the little bit of the Polynesian Bowl to go by, but it's one of those things where it's like you really have to take into account the ability that he has and the recruiting ranking that he has because, again, more often than not, those 5 stars pan out. And, you have guys like Ethan Kalkumanis who kind of are what they are at this point. Kalkumanis wasn't real. And I had him, I thought he was going, I had Minnesota. I thought, and I was completely wrong. I thought Minnesota might be a dark horse in the West. And I thought Kalkumanis was going to be better than he did. But a lot of the quarterbacks, like you said, are new, and he's going to be behind some of these guys. You got Dylan Gabriel probably as a top quarterback, without a doubt. And I think that Raiola has the opportunity to climb into that top 6-5 range this season. So yeah, I think 9's completely fair. And just looking back at some of the 5-star recruits at the quarterback position, the top recruits, more recently, I feel like they're hitting more often than not. But it remains to be seen. So I think 9's completely fair. I did a quarterback ranking. I can't quite remember where I had him. But I believe it was somewhere in that range. But yeah, I agree with you. It's one of those things where it's hard and you can project based on, and that's what you can do. Like with coaches, for instance, like coaching rankings. Yeah, with the coaches, you can judge based on the team success. Like I had Greg Schiano, I think 4th or 5th in my coaches rankings because what he's doing at Rutgers is he can do that at Rutgers. The physical style that he brings because of the Jersey style is very physical brand of football, but he brings the best out in those guys. Rutgers was the bottom dwellers and nobody thought they would ever make any traction in the Big Ten. They were just kind of like hamstrung coming into the Big Ten in every way. And so, to your point, it's not about necessarily the records or anything like that. It's about the ability to coach and bring the best out in your players. Same with the quarterback. you can have a quarterback out there like, a Raiola on last year's team where we didn't have a ton of talent. And yes, we had talent, but injuries and not a lot of experience. But he could go out there and make those guys better. And you have to kind of base it on that. How much better does he make these players around him? And how much of that is him? And I think that's kind of the way you have to rank these guys. But right now, with him not having any experience, but we'll see over the course of the spring. But everything's going to be very vanilla. We're not going to see much until we start hitting the games. And those first 6 games, like I said, they're they're pretty favorable. So we could see some development and flashes from him very, very early on.